My name is Deborah Wells. I'm 35 years old, and this is the story of how the people I trusted most, my own family, turned my world upside down. For years, I'd built a peaceful, independent life in my cozy Sioux Falls apartment, a place filled with memories and the comforting silence of being truly home. But all of that was shattered one rainy Tuesday afternoon when the front door swung open without warning. "Sleep in the storage room or get out," my parents shouted, their voices sharp as knives slicing through the air. I stood frozen, trying to process what I had just heard. My brother and his family had barged in unannounced, their bulky suitcases scattered across my living room like they owned the place. "We need the space," my mother snapped, barely looking at me. "You're single, Deborah. You can adjust." Adjust. To a cramped, dust-choked storage room stacked with boxes and cobwebs. My brother didn't even flinch. "You'd better leave by tomorrow," he added coldly, "or things will get messy." The words felt like a slap, cold, deliberate, and cruel. This wasn't just any apartment. It was the home I inherited from my late grandmother, a symbol of her love and everything I'd built for myself. And yet here, they were treating me like a burden in my own house. I tried to fight back, my voice trembling. "This is my place. You can't just take over." But my father's glare cut me down instantly. "Don't be selfish," he said, turning his back as if I were a stranger. Selfish. For wanting to stay in my own home. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys, heart racing with betrayal. I stepped outside the door, closing behind me with a heavy finality. I wasn't giving up, not yet. A week later, my phone lit up with my brother's number. His voice on the other end was frantic, panicked, and almost unrecognizable. "It's impossible. This can't be happening," he stammered. Something had changed, something big, and suddenly I was at the center of it all. Before we go deeper into my story, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you're watching and which city are you in, so I can see how far my story has gone beyond my home. The early October air was crisp as I parked outside my Sioux Falls apartment. I unlocked the door, expecting the familiar comfort of my home inherited from my late grandmother. Instead, I walked into chaos. The vibrant paintings she'd left me, ones I'd hung with care, were gone from the living room walls. In their place were cheap posters and a gaudy family portrait that screamed someone else's taste. My stomach churned as I realized my brother, 38, had invaded my space. His suitcases and boxes cluttered the floor, as if my home was now his storage unit. "Mom, what's going on?" I demanded, spotting her in the kitchen. My mother's lips pursed, her tone sharp and dismissive. "Your brother's going through financial difficulties. He needs this apartment more than you do." Her words stung, implying I was disposable because I had no family of my own. I turned to see Mark, his wife, and their young son sprawled across my couch in the main bedroom, my belongings shoved into a corner like forgotten junk. My favorite armchair, a gift from my grandmother, was buried under their coats and bags. "This is temporary," Mark said, not meeting my eyes, his voice cold. "You'll figure something out." I bit back a retort, my pulse racing. How could they act like this was their home? My father emerged from the hallway, carrying my coffee table to the storage closet. "Dad, stop," I snapped, but he waved me off. "We're optimizing the space," he said, as if my life was just clutter to be rearranged. His casual dismissal hit harder than any argument. I scanned the room, noticing my bookshelves now held Mark's old trophies, my decorative vases replaced by their tacky knickknacks. Every corner of my apartment screamed their presence, erasing mine. I stormed to my desk, now wedged against a wall, and pulled out the folder with my grandmother's will. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, confirming what I already knew: the apartment was mine, legally and solely. The contract, signed and notarized, listed Deborah Wells as the owner, with no mention of my brother or parents. They had no claim, no right to push me out. Yet here they were, treating my home like a free hotel. Mark's wife was unpacking more boxes in my bedroom, her laughter grating as she tossed my clothes aside. "We'll need this closet," she said to Mark, not even glancing at me. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. "This is my home," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. "You can't just take it." Mom rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Deborah. Family helps family." Her words were a twisted knife framing my resistance as selfishness. Mark chimed in, his tone sharp. You're single. You don't need all this space. His entitlement made my blood boil. Did they think I'd just roll over and let them walk all over me? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Yelling wouldn't solve this. I needed a plan, something smarter than their arrogance. I slipped the will back into its folder, my mind racing. They thought they could bully me out of my own home, but they were wrong. I'd spent years building my life here, and I wasn't about to let them tear it down. As I stood in the doorway watching Mark rearrange my living room like he owned it, a quiet resolve settled in. This was my apartment, and I'd fight to keep it. I just needed to figure out how. 4 days later, my home felt like it belonged to someone else. I walked into my apartment, my heart heavy, only to be hit with another blow. My bank app pinged with a notification. $5,000 had vanished from our family's shared account, the one set up for emergencies after my grandmother's passing. I checked the transaction details, and there it was. Mark's name, bold and unapologetic, linked to the withdrawal. He hadn't even bothered to ask me. "Mark, what's this?" I demanded, holding up my phone. He shrugged, lounging on my couch. "We needed it for bills," he said, his tone flat, as if my money was his to spend. My blood boiled, but he just scrolled through his phone, dismissing me. Then I noticed Mom in my bedroom, rifling through my jewelry box. She held up my grandmother's sapphire necklace, the one I'd worn at her funeral. "I'm just borrowing this," Mom said, slipping it around her neck. "It looks better on me anyway." Her casual entitlement stung worse than the theft. I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off. "Don't make a fuss, Deborah. It's just temporary." Temporary. My possessions were being treated like community property, and I was supposed to smile and nod. Later that evening, I tried to log into my Wi-Fi to check my bank records again. The password had been changed. I confronted Dad, who was fiddling with the router. "We're cutting back on usage," he said, not looking up. "You don't need it as much as Mark's family does. Save for the greater good." His words twisted the knife deeper, framing my basic needs as selfish. I clenched my jaw, realizing they were boxing me out of my own life, piece by piece. The next morning, Mark cornered me in the kitchen. "You should cut your work hours," he said, his voice laced with fake concern. "You're always at that accounting job. It's stressing you out, and we need you here to help us settle in. Help them." In my own apartment, I stared at him, incredulous. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're not pulling your weight for the family." His accusation hit like a punch, implying I was the one failing them. I pushed back, my voice sharp. "This is my home, Mark. I don't owe you anything." He smirked, unfazed, and walked away. By the afternoon, the final straw came. Mom and Mark sat me down at my own dining table, their faces stern. "You need to move out," Mom said, her tone cold. "Mark's family needs this space to feel comfortable. You're just one person." Mark nodded, adding, "It's what's best for everyone." Everyone except me, apparently. Their words echoed in my head, each one a calculated jab to guilt me into submission. I looked around my apartment, my sanctuary, now overrun with their belongings and their rules. They were rewriting my life, and I was expected to vanish. I stood up, my hands trembling but my resolve hardening. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice steady. They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting resistance. I grabbed my folder with the inheritance papers, the ones I'd checked days earlier, and stuffed them into my bag. I walked out the door, not because I was giving up, but because I needed space to fight back. They thought they could manipulate me out of my home, but I was done playing their game. I'd take back what was mine, no matter what it took. The next morning, I sat in a Sioux Falls coffee shop with my laptop open. My hands shook as I typed South Dakota inheritance law into the search bar, determined to confirm my rights. The screen loaded with statutes, and I scanned them carefully, cross-referencing with my grandmother's will. The words were clear. The apartment was mine, deeded solely to me, Deborah Wells, with no co-owners. No one, not Mark, not Mom, not Dad, had any legal claim. My resolve hardened. They'd pushed me out, manipulated me, but I wasn't powerless. I saved the legal references to my notes, feeling a spark of control return. I searched for a lawyer and found Sharon Cole, a Sioux Falls attorney with glowing reviews for handling property disputes. I called her office, my voice steady despite my nerves. "I need help," I said, explaining how my family had taken over my apartment. Sharon listened patiently, then asked for the inheritance contract. I emailed her the scanned pages, including the notarized will that named me the sole owner. Within hours, she called back. "This is airtight," Sharon said, her tone confident. "Your family has no standing. We can start with a formal notice to vacate." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me from the chaos. Sharon drafted a legal notice that day demanding that Mark, his wife, and my parents leave within 30 days as required by South Dakota law. She included a clause citing unauthorized occupancy and potential damages, making it clear I meant business. I reviewed the document, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. "Send it," I told her, signing my name digitally. Sharon promised to have it delivered by a process server to ensure it was legally binding. Next, I contacted my apartment security company to reset the electronic lock code. I drove to the complex, meeting a technician who programmed a new code ensuring only I could access the apartment. "No one else gets in without this," he said, handing me the confirmation email. I tested the lock, the soft beep signaling my first real victory. My family would be locked out, their free ride over. I imagined Mark's face when he realized he couldn't just waltz in anymore, and a grim satisfaction settled in. That evening, my phone buzzed relentlessly, Mark calling over and over. "You can't do this," he shouted in a voicemail, his voice cracking with panic. "This is our home now." I ignored every call, letting them pile up unanswered. His desperation was proof my plan was working. Mom and Dad sent texts demanding I stop this nonsense, but I didn't respond. They'd underestimated me, thinking I'd cave under their pressure. But I was done being their doormat. To seal the notice's validity, Sharon recommended a notary, Lawrence Bell, whose office was downtown. I met him the next day, handing over the signed notice for certification. Lawrence reviewed it carefully, his stamp and signature confirming its legality. "This is solid," he said, handing me the notarized copy. "They'll have to comply, or it's a court matter." I nodded, clutching the document like a shield. My family thought they could bully me out of my home, but I was fighting back with the law on my side. They'd learn soon enough that I wasn't going anywhere. On day 6, Elaine Fisher stopped by with a shocking revelation. My best friend since college, Elaine met me at a Sioux Falls diner, her face tight with concern. "Deborah, you need to hear this," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Her voice softened as she reached for my hand. "I know this has been hell for you. I'm here. Okay." Her words were a balm, easing the weight of my family's betrayal. Then she dropped the bombshell. "I overheard Mark bragging at a bar. He withdrew $15,000 from your grandmother's inheritance fund. Not for bills, something else." My stomach dropped. 15,000? That was 3 times what he'd already taken without asking. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the inheritance account, my hands trembling. The bank statement confirmed Elaine's words, a withdrawal of $15,000 dated 2 days ago, linked to Mark's name. No permission, no explanation, just gone. The account was meant for property taxes and maintenance, not his personal piggy bank. "How could he do this?" I whispered, my voice cracking. Elaine squeezed my hand. "He's out of control, Deborah. You need to stop him." Her support gave me the strength to keep going, knowing I wasn't alone in this fight. I spent the next hour digging through my phone for evidence. I found old texts from Mark casually mentioning borrowing from the fund as if it was no big deal. Combined with the bank statement, it was damning. I forwarded everything to Sharon, my lawyer, with a note: "Mark's stealing from me. What can we do?" She replied within minutes, her email sharp and focused. "This is fraud," Sharon wrote. "We can sue for restitution plus interest and possibly punitive damages. Send me those texts and statements." I compiled every document, screenshots, bank records, even a transfer receipt Mark hadn't bothered to hide, and sent them to her, my resolve growing. Sharon called me later, her voice steady. "We'll file a lawsuit against Mark for unauthorized withdrawal," she said. "With this evidence, we can demand the full amount back, plus 8% interest under South Dakota law. He won't get away with this." Her confidence fueled mine. I imagined Mark's smug face when he realized his scheme was unraveling. For the first time, I felt like I was taking back control not just of my apartment, but of my family's lives. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. Mom had posted on social media a long rant calling me selfish and heartless for kicking out my family. Deborah cares more about her apartment than her own blood, she wrote, tagging relatives for sympathy. The lies stung, twisting my actions into something cruel. I could feel the judgment from distant cousins I barely knew. But I wasn't going to let her smear me. I opened my email and drafted a message to our extended family attaching the bank statements and Mark's texts. "This is the truth," I wrote. "Mark stole from our inheritance and Mom's covering for him. I'm protecting what's mine." I hit send, my heart racing but steady. They could spin their stories, but I had the facts. Mid-November, the Sioux Falls courthouse became my battleground. I stood beside Sharon, my lawyer, as the judge delivered the verdict. My heart raced as she ruled in my favor against Mark for his unauthorized withdrawal from the inheritance fund. The defendant must repay $15,000, she declared, in monthly installments of $2,000 starting next month. Mark's face paled, his hands gripping the table. I felt a surge of triumph knowing justice was finally mine. Sharon squeezed my arm, whispering, "You did it." The weight of months of betrayal began to lift, replaced by a quiet strength. The judge then turned to my second claim against Mom and Dad for damaging my property. I'd submitted photos of my grandmother's paintings scratched and discarded and my furniture scuffed and rearranged without care. The plaintiffs are awarded $5,000 for property damage, the judge stated. Mom gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief, while Dad stared at the floor. The money wasn't just compensation, it was a message that they couldn't trample my life without consequences. I caught Sharon's nod, a silent confirmation that we'd built a solid case. Outside the courthouse, I learned Mark and his wife were scrambling. A mutual acquaintance texted me that they'd sold their SUV to cover the first payment, but the strain was tearing them apart. Mark's wife had been arguing with him publicly, her voice sharp as she blamed him for their financial mess. Their marriage, already shaky, was cracking under the pressure of his actions. I didn't feel pity. Mark had made his choices, and now he was living with them. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad had moved out of my apartment after the legal notice landing in a cramped rental across town. Elaine forwarded me their social media posts, whining about the dingy walls and noisy neighbors in their new place. "It's unfair," Mom wrote, as if I'd forced them into poverty. I shook my head, their complaints a hollow attempt to deflect blame. They'd chosen to side with Mark, and now they were stuck in a reality they couldn't manipulate. A few days later, Brenda Hayes, my neighbor across the hall, knocked on my door. "Deborah, you need to see this," she said, showing me her phone. Security footage from the building's entrance showed Mark trying to sneak into my apartment late at night, fumbling with the old code. The camera caught his frustrated scowl as the lock denied him. "He was here last night," Brenda said, her voice firm. "I thought you should know." My pulse quickened. Mark wasn't done trying to take what wasn't his. I thanked Brenda, grateful for her vigilance. That same day, I called a security company to upgrade my apartment's defenses. They installed motion sensor cameras and a reinforced alarm system, ensuring no one could get near my home without me knowing. "This is state-of-the-art," the technician said, showing me the app to monitor alerts. I tested the system, watching the live feed on my phone. My apartment, my sanctuary, was finally secure. Mark could try all he wanted, but he'd never cross my threshold again. I'd fought too hard to let him anywhere near my life. Late December, Mark stood on my doorstep looking defeated. His shoulders slumped, his eyes avoiding mine. "I'm sorry, Deborah," he said, his voice low. "Can we work this out? We're family." His words sounded rehearsed, like a script he'd practiced to win me over. I studied his face, searching for sincerity, but saw only desperation. The man who'd stolen from me, who'd tried to take my home, wasn't here to make amends. He wanted a way out of his mess. "No," I said, my tone firm. "You made your choices." I closed the door, my chest tight, but my resolve unshaken. The next day, a letter arrived from Mom, her handwriting shaky on the envelope. "Please, Deborah, for the sake of family," she wrote, begging me to forgive Mark and let them back into my life. Her words dripped with guilt, painting me as the one tearing us apart. I read it once, then set it aside. Replying would only drag me back into their cycle of manipulation. I'd fought too hard to reclaim my space, my peace. Mom's plea wasn't about love, it was about control, and I wasn't giving it back. While cleaning my apartment, I noticed deep scratches on the hardwood floor hidden under where Mark's furniture had been. My stomach sank. These weren't accidental scuffs, but deliberate gouges likely from dragging heavy items without care. I took photos and sent them to Sharon, my lawyer, with a note. More damage from them. Sharon replied quickly. We can add this to the property claim. Send me the repair estimate. I contacted a contractor who quoted $3,000 to refinish the floor. I forwarded the details to Sharon, determined to hold them accountable for every mark they'd left. Brenda, my neighbor, stopped by with coffee and gossip. Word around town is Mark and his wife are fighting nonstop, she said, stirring sugar into her cup. People saw them yelling outside a diner. Divorce rumors are flying. I nodded, unsurprised. Mark's reckless choices, stealing, losing the lawsuit, had pushed his marriage to the edge. His wife's frustration wasn't my burden, but it confirmed the chaos he'd brought on himself. Brenda's updates, though small, reminded me I had allies watching out for me. I spent the next week restoring my apartment. I bought new paintings from a local Sioux Falls gallery, their bold colors breathing life back into the walls. I rearranged my furniture, placing my grandmother's armchair by the window where it belonged. Every change felt like erasing their presence, reclaiming my space. I polished the shelves, dusted the vases, and hung curtains I'd picked out myself. The apartment wasn't just a place anymore. It was mine again, a reflection of who I was, not who they wanted me to be. Standing in my living room, I felt a rush of freedom. Living alone without their demands or lies was a gift I hadn't appreciated before. I could breathe, think, exist without justifying my place in my own home. The battles, legal, emotional, personal, had been brutal, but they'd forged a strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't just surviving their betrayal. I was thriving beyond it. My apartment, my life was mine to shape, and no one could take that away. Early January, Mark's third payment hit my account. I checked my bank app, confirming the $2,000 with 18 months of payments left. Each deposit was a reminder of the justice I'd fought for, a small victory against his betrayal. I kept a spreadsheet to track every cent, ensuring he couldn't slip out of his obligation. My life was moving forward, and I wasn't letting his shadow linger. Brenda dropped by with updates from the neighborhood grapevine. Your parents are struggling in that cheap rental, she said, sipping tea at my kitchen table. And Mark, his wife, left him. Divorce papers were filed last week. I nodded, unsurprised. Mom and Dad's complaints about their new place and Mark's crumbling marriage were the consequences of their choices. I felt no guilt, only relief that their chaos was no longer my burden. That weekend, I hosted a small party in my apartment. Elaine and a few friends filled the space with laughter, their voices echoing off the freshly painted walls. We toasted to new beginnings, my home finally feeling like mine again. The new artwork gleamed under the lights, and my grandmother's armchair sat proudly by the window. Every corner reflected my strength, my victory. Looking back, I learned a hard truth. You have to protect your boundaries, even from family. They might guilt you, manipulate you, but your peace is worth fighting for. I stood up to their lies, their theft, and their control, and I came out stronger. No one gets to take what's yours. Not your home, not your dignity. As I stood on my balcony that night, the Sioux Falls skyline sparkling below, I felt free. Justice wasn't just winning in court. It was reclaiming my life, my space, my voice. I'd fought for every inch of it, and no one could dim that light again. Thanks for staying with my story. Comment below. What would you do if your family betrayed you? Like and share to spread this lesson.